All right. Returning to the podcast is Etienne de la Boissier Squared of ArtOfLiberty.org. All of his links will be in the description. He's author of To See the Cage is to Leave It, something we've talked about in the past. He's got an upcoming book, which will also discuss the greatest theft in human history. Welcome back, Etienne.
It is good to be with you and your audience once again.
It's always great chatting. And I guess on this occasion, we're going to talk about, we're going to dialogue about the Dialog Society or Club. You've written recently a very fascinating article, and let me share the screen for a moment on that. We're loading it up. Here we go. The real story behind CIA contractor Thiel's Dialog Society, weaponized inflation, media control, and AI kill drones. And we're going to go through this, but I thought I'd mention that just right off the bat, you're one of the few people in the alt media space who brought up Nicholas Berggruin, right? Mm-hmm. He's down here because we're going to go through this. How this new elite group is composed of CFR members, WEF members, and Berggruin. And I started an article 2 years ago talking about Berggruin, which I haven't. I'm hoping to finish, start publishing some of those articles this week and next week. Finally, getting around to it. But you're like the only person I've seen, maybe Peter Duke as well, talk about Berggruin. So yeah, just to kick things off, tell us about the dialogue.
Well, first of all, our thesis at the Art of Liberty Foundation is that government is illegitimate on its face. It's impossible to have a legitimate government, and really government is best thought of as a technique for robbing and controlling populations. And if you're robbing and controlling the world, you've got to have meetings, and those meetings are being coordinated through what we like to call front groups and policy shops. And at the very highest level is the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Berggruin Foundation, and Dialog Society appears to be one of the highest level, encompassing the leadership of all of the rest. Now, different people attend different, meetings, different societies, but really what these groups do is they give this organized crime system, intergenerational organized crime system that is kind of running things from behind the scenes, the ability to have public, have meetings, okay? Not for the public. When I say public, I mean, people know about the meetings frequently. Now, in the case of Dialog, they were able to keep Dialog a secret for 2 decades. And so they've been having these secret meetings for 2 decades without it really becoming public knowledge until, this year when there was a leak of a small fraction of the membership list. So evidently there's been over 1,000 plus attendees, but somewhere around 200-ish have leaked out. We did a deep dive on about 140 of the 200-ish that have leaked out, focusing on kind of the most important and the ones that really make our thesis that, hey, this is, it's the banks at the top of the food chain, and the banks and the government, the government these are the people creating money out of thin air using fracture. The banks are, creating money. So the thesis is it's the banks creating money out of thin air, even though it's inflationary. And even though it steals the value out of everybody else's money, they're given this exorbitant privilege. So when you go to a bank to get a loan, whether it's a mortgage or a car loan or, loan for college, whatever it is, they're not loaning you depositor money. They just tickle the ivories. They create those digital dollars. They credit your account, and you begin, paying back a loan that they created out of thin air. Now, that process is inflationary, and the more money that the banks create, or the more money that the Treasury creates to finance these ridiculous deficits and this ridiculous spending and this ridiculous, theft that's going on in Washington, D.C., the more money that's created, well, that is inflationary, and those excess dollars begin bidding up prices. and that is increasing the price of everything from eggs to oil to housing to college education to healthcare to you name it. And so it's a hidden tax on the American people that is essentially being collected by the government, that is handing it out the back door to, in many cases, the members of the Dialog Society for weapon systems that we don't need to fight wars based on lies and manufactured intelligence, either for countries like Israel, which we're doing right now, or just to sell weapon systems and to, and as a form of eugenics, keeping the populations low and keeping the country focused on anything but the fact that the government is stealing the value out of their money and impoverishing them and waging a kind of economic warfare. So I wanted to kind of set the table with an understanding that the real theft and the thing that Dialog represents, and we're going to get into how that makes the case, is that government is illegitimate on its face. And that is one of the things that the members of Dialog, either on the media side or on the algorithmic censorship of the internet side, that's one of the things that is being hidden. That's one of the big things that you're not allowed to see, that is being censored on social media, that you will never ever see discussed on the mainstream media, which these organizations, this is what the membership is. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of take the audience through, through my article, and we will talk about the specific names and the specific way that it works. And so what I mentioned earlier is I mentioned that, the number one theft, this is my new upcoming book, The Greatest Theft in Human History. And what we did is we've been the first to really measure what this total amount of theft is. So when the government creates money out of thin air, and that's inflationary, and that reduces the purchasing power of the dollars that everyone else in society earns and saves, how much does that cost the average person in society? And so, one of the big things that we did is we used, Fed data and the money supply data and the CPI rate, and we used 5 different AI systems to kind of calculate what that theft is. And for the average person making $60K a year, if you make $60K a year every year for 40 years, you're going to make $2.4 million. Let's say you have a 20-year retirement. Over that 40-year career and 20-year retirement, the government is going, and the banking system is going to steal $1.4 million out of your earnings and savings through inflation. And the inflation component is made up of, kind of pure inflation, the 2%, the Fed targets 2% loss of purchasing power a year. They frequently miss it. We're somewhere around 4% right now. And so using the Fed's own 2% target, that's going to cost you about $215,000. There's something called the cotillion effect, which is a well-known economic principle that when money enters the economy in giant chunks, like the Fed borrowing or creating/borrowing hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars at a time, or the banks creating hundreds of millions of dollars in loans to favored corporations and cartel companies, that the people that receive the money first, they get the maximum buying power out of the money, and they buy at yesterday's prices with these new dollars. The dollars, by the time they circulate through society and they get to wage earners and retirees, now you're buying with new dollars at yesterday's or at today's prices, and those dollars are going to spend a lot less. And so you're going to lose about 72K in that. You're going to lose about $308,000 having to buy and borrow, the average person, for things that you would not have had to borrow from the very banks that created this inflationary system. And so when the crooked monetary system bids up the price of houses and forces money into houses as an inflation hedge and does a whole bunch of things that increase the price of housing, now all of a sudden the average person has to borrow on average about $308,000. And that's not just housing. That number includes college education and for, like the average person will have to borrow for healthcare occasionally. But you're going to now have to borrow for things that you would not have had to borrow for because the crooked monetary system has made them unaffordable. And so the total comes out to about $595,000 that is going to be stolen from the average person, that in many cases they had no idea that this dynamic was going on. They see their money losing value. They see the cost of food and clothing and gas going up, but they've never been able to really understand what that cost looks like over an entire 40-year career and 20-year retirement. Well, it's over $500,000 just in inflation. And then the government is going to come and steal about $206,000 in federal income tax. There's going to be $367,000 in payroll tax. There's going to be about $200,000 in state and local taxes. And because the government is lying about what the inflation rate is, and they're understating inflation, on the low end, you're going to pay about $16,000. They're going to steal about $16,000 that they owe you for Social Security over that 20-year retirement. And because they're lying about the inflation rate, they're not going to give you a cost of living adjustment like you deserve. And so on the low end, that's $16K. In the report we break down, there's a new alternative inflation index called the Reality Index that uses the exact same weights and measures that the Fed uses, takes out the shenanigans of hedonic adjustment and substitution bias and some of the tricks that they use to understate what the inflation rate is. And their calculation is about $70,000. So if you use their the Fed's own weights and numbers without the Fed's or the Bureau of Labor Statistics shenanigans, you're going to get $70K. And so, but conservatively, you're looking at $1.4 million. We break it down in the report at ArtOfLiberty.org/inflation, how that is as conservative as you can get on the number. We had earlier reports that were higher. We changed the methodology on the headline number, but compared if you were on a gold standard, which would make your dollars buy more and more every year, gold is benignly deflationary, which means your purchasing power would actually increase by about 1% to 1.5 to 2% a year, and over 40-year career and 20-year retirement, that 1.5% a year really adds up. And so if you added in what you're losing, against an honest monetary system like gold, then it actually goes to about $1.96 million. So they're going to steal almost $2 million from the average person. Now that's the big idea. This is what's going on. This is really the most impacting thing that happens to an average American. Like there's nothing like to a degree, the Iran war is important. To a degree, it's transgenders in sports. I'm offended by it too. There's a whole bunch of things the news is making a big idea of, about on a daily basis. But the core thing that impacts most people is the average person is having $2 million between, conservatively, it's really more than that, but let's say $2 million stolen from them over their lifetime. And that is the big idea. Now, the people that are doing the stealing, they've got to keep this out of the news, right? So they've got to control what's going on the news, and they've got to keep it off of social media platforms, and they've got to keep this because the population would hang them from a petard. And so how do they do it? So we actually break it down in the book, and I'm not going to get in there, but I'm going to just say that it's been the largest theft in human history, and it's ongoing. And so it's been 182 trillion to 255 trillion dollars that have been stolen from the American people alone. And this is going on in other countries. Other, governments are running very similar schemes with their central bank and their banking industry. And so that 182 trillion doesn't transfer dollar for dollar. It transfers to the banking industry over the same time period, 1913 to 2026. The banking industry has made about 15 to 25 trillion dollars in quote unquote profits. I would argue they're not really profits, but I mean, this is why the bank is the biggest building in most cities. In fact, we were driving through Tampa the other day. There's literally like the top 4 skyscrapers in Tampa are all banks. And you're just like going, what, how does this happen? Where are they getting all this money? How is this, where's this money coming from? They're stealing it out of the value of your money. They're this whole system is stealing the value out. And so the Dialog Society exposes the coordination. And so first of all, as we mentioned, the Dialog Society is an organization that was set up by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a gay American billionaire. He was a high school valedictorian. He got a BA in philosophy from Stanford and a JD from Stanford Law in 1992. At Stanford, the thing that really created Peter Thiel, that made him that created the network, was he co-founded the Stanford Review in 1987. It was a conservative-leaning paper, and it became the seed of his entire network. And the review had received funding from Irving Kristol, the father of neoconservatism, who had documented connections to the CIA and the conservative collegiate network, which was then operated by Irving Kristol and William Simon's Institute for Educational Affairs. William Simon was a Secretary of Treasury under Nixon. He was also a Wall Street executive. And so you're going to see Thiel's network was essentially created from the beginning by people that were associated with the intelligence agencies, including at the foundation level. And Irving Kristol, he co-founded and edited a magazine called Encounter that had received funding from the CIA. CIA officer Thomas Braden wrote an article, "I'm glad the CIA is immoral," admitting that the CIA had subsidized Encounter. So it's not I'm just saying, I think it was a CIA publication. The New York Times reported on it, and the Saturday Evening Post reported on it. And then again, Thomas Braden came out and said that, admitted it essentially. And so, they were, the way that one of the weapons that we're going to talk about that is being wielded by Dialog is this. The number one weapon is the ability to control perception, to control the information that society receives, so that, you can trick society into thinking that government is legitimate, desirable, and necessary. And then society gets trapped into really a no-win game of easily rigged elections, where the only way to have change is to vote harder on black box voting machines and notoriously crooked paper ballots. And so that really is, and we call that the brute force manufactured consensus. And so what the government and what the monopoly media are doing is they've bought up the media, they've installed the government to control the information that society receives, whether that information is coming from the mandatory government school, whether that's coming from an accredited private school that has to teach, that the government is legitimate, desirable, and necessary to get their accreditation, or whether that comes from a monopoly media system or a state, run university, whatever. The brute force manufactured consensus is that government is legitimate. The only way to change things is to vote harder, and you're just not doing enough if you're not getting your way in the political process, as the political process runs roughshod and rips off everybody for $2 million. So this weapon, has been wielded by the CIA, this control of perception on the Stanford campus, with a student newspaper where they give a kid that they've probably talent identified, and they begin working him into their program. They create the legend, and so in the intelligence agencies, it's called creating the legend. Barack Obama was made president of the Harvard Law Review, even though he'd never written a single article for the Harvard Law Review. But because we believe he's another, intelligence agency created legend that was then installed in the presidency. But before he was installed in the presidency, he was installed as president of the Harvard Law Review without having written a single article for the Harvard Law Review, because they were creating the legend of Obama that would allow him to be, elevated into the Senate, the House of Representatives, the congressional, or the Illinois House, then the Senate, then the presidency. And so part of that was, giving him a Vanity Fair, article and a New York Times thing. And so we'll see this happen, with Thiel.
Now, just real quick, and they gave Obama a nearly, was it $1 billion building now in my home Chicago, that was using taxpayer funds to build it. And they had recently the event where you had U2 and Bruce Springsteen and Eddie Vedder singing to, and at the event were not just the Obamas, but the Bidens, the Bushes, and the Clintons, which just tells you it's one big club. And could we say everything that you're outlining here, that it basically follows a formula? These elite networks have been around for centuries, and all they're doing is, as the older crowd fades away, the Rockefeller, who just passed, David, and Henry Kissinger, all they're doing is just updating with new blood, as you're talking about it, as well as new forums, because some of the old forums also sort of die out because we have these new developments, new technologies. And so they just kind of rehash the same formula and update it for our times, no?
Well, absolutely. And it's not so much that they die out as that they are exposed. And then because of that exposure, then people begin connecting the dots. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. But I agree with everything that you just said. And so there is a talent identification program. It takes a lot of people to run the world, okay? And it takes a lot of very talented, you've got to have very intelligent people. And so Stanford and Silicon Valley since the 1950s has essentially been a Pentagon and a DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The internet came out of DARPA. A lot of next generation technologies come out of DARPA. And so there has been a connection between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon and DARPA through something called the Highland Forum, and through a network of venture capitalists that I believe and others believe are being given a head start, an understanding of what the Pentagon is going to be buying or what the Pentagon needs. And then those venture capitalists, they take money and they take, they privatize the profits of defense spending, creating this, network of companies that are going to either, that the Pentagon has either decided to invest in this company, or the Pentagon has decided that they're going to give this company money to invest, to create something for them that they want. And so that network is what I believe is exemplified in Peter Thiel. And so he co-founded a company, Confinity, in 1998, which became PayPal after merging with Elon Musk's X. And so now PayPal and Elon Musk, so Elon Musk and Peter Thiel come together. They're given banking licenses, money transmittal licenses in a variety of states. And what I think that they're doing is that DARPA had invented the internet and had access to the internet for decades before they actually released it to the population. I think they'd already figured out, they'd brought in the venture capitalists, they'd brought in the futurists, they'd brought in the cultural anthropologists, they'd already figured out that there was going to be social media, they'd already figured out that there was going to be instantaneous money transmittal like PayPal, they'd already figured out that there was going to be video streaming, and there was going to be, search engines and things like that. And they began, placing their chips on a variety of different companies that would then develop these next generation technologies. And so they're going to, number one, they're going to privatize the profits to defense industry insiders, leveraging hundreds of billions of dollars of DARPA investment made on the taxpayer nickel. So you paid for that R&D, but they're going to take they're going to sneaky before they turn it over to society. They're going to place their bets on which of these technologies are going to rise. And then one of the strategies behind that is a continuation of, we're controlling the information that the population receives about government and the legitimacy of government, and we're hiding the criminality coming out of Washington, D.C., and we're ensuring that we can get our people elected and we can dominate any election with our monopoly media advantage, and which will become an algorithmic promotion or algorithmic censorship advantage in the years to come. But right now at 2002, it's in its infancy. And so PayPal benefits from this money transmittal life. Thiel becomes a billionaire. But the thing that really made him his money, or actually, it really made him his money, is Thiel becomes the first investor in Facebook. And so now the PayPal mafia splits apart. Thiel becomes a kind of active venture capitalist, now investing in technologies that coincidentally are also tied to DARPA. What a coincidence. And so the number one is DARPA had a project called LifeLog. It was a ontology-based subsystem that captures the stories and makes accessible the flow of one person's experience and interactions with the world in order to support a broad spectrum of associates and assistants and other system capabilities. And so LifeLog was going to be the thing that followed each person in the United States around, cataloging everything that you do in life. It became, people found out about it. They thought it was creepy. They didn't want to, they didn't want all the government to have all of this data. And so the Pentagon kills it on February 4th, 2004. And on February 4th, 2004, simultaneously, Facebook is born. And Facebook goes on to be that what would have been a government program and nobody could have made any money from, becomes a private company that now lots and lots of people will end up making billions and billions and billions of dollars. Number one, Peter Thiel. Now, interestingly, the head of DARPA from 2009 to 2012 is a woman named Regina Dugan. And Regina Dugan will then go on to be an executive at Google, which is also a CIA-connected company. And so one of the articles that we have on the Daily News is, I forget the the gentleman's name, How the CIA Created Google, which breaks down the connections between Google and the intelligence agencies.
Was that maybe Nafiz Ahmed?
Nafiz Ahmed, right? Yes, that's the exact author, and he breaks down the connection between the specific DARPA programs that financed Sergey Brin and his partners. The research grants they got to develop Google, and the connections between Google and the Highland Forum, which was a DARPA, confab between Silicon Valley companies, these venture investors connected to the Pentagon and to the intelligence agencies, and the specific companies that are doing the work like that they want to be able to control information and to be able to control information warfare. So now Regina Dugan, so there's two, so now we've got really kind of two different, CIA companies. We've got Google and we've got Facebook. We'll say suspected at this point, but you get the idea. And so, to kind of make the case or, suggest the case, Regina Dugan bails out of her low-paying, head of DARPA role, relatively low-paying head of DARPA role, becomes a Google executive, VP of engineering of something called the ATAP program. And there she ran something called Project Tango, which mobile phones, using the Android operating system, mobile phones create 3D spatial maps of where they are. And so your mobile phone, if it was turned on without, if you installed this program with your knowledge or without your knowledge or whatever, your phone using the camera is figuring out where it is, any place in the world. It's creating a 3D spatial map of everything that it can see. It's adding to it over time. If you're walking and carrying it on, in a secret building in Korea or any place, wherever, it's now, taking photos and creating a map. It can geolocate itself in the world. That's one of the projects that she did. Then she bounces over to Facebook in 2016 through 2018. She leads something called Building 8, which was their DARPA style, like literally called DARPA style Moonshot Lab. And she works on two different projects prominently. One was called Portal. And I don't know if y'all remember this, but at one time, Google years and years ago had a series of video conferencing endpoints for video calling. But essentially, Facebook had these endpoints called Portal, and these Facebook endpoints put a microphone and a video camera into people's homes. So she was in charge of the program that put a microphone and video cameras into people's homes as part of video calling, and that could be switched on whenever they want. And then she worked on something called Silent Voice First brain computer interface that read minds. So anyway, that is again just makes the connection. And so Thiel invest $500,000, which back in 2004. Was a lot of money, which was probably $5 million, bucks today, and gets roughly 10% of the company and a board seat. And that is going to be, even more so than, what he made probably off of PayPal. And then
before continuing, I wanted to comment on some things you mentioned. By the way, just to go back, what you talked about initially regarding the theft through inflation, right? And I think that's an important point that you laid out, because, for example, I recently had on Mikkel Thorup, and I posited him the question of the threats before us. And I've said for a while that I think our biggest threat is, besides what we're discussing now, and the algorithm ghetto, so to speak, the electronic concentration camp, that and the cost of living, simply. Like it's not a sexy threat, right? People like in alt media, they make all these hypes, World War III and famine, and it's going to be Mad Max. I've had on people like Michael Yon like 4 years ago, and he said in 2022, we're all going to die. It's going to be famine. Like, that hasn't happened yet. But what has happened has been the construction of this electronic gulag. and what you nailed, which was the inflation threat. And I talk about this all the time. Where I live, housing has tripled, food has
Yes.
doubled, but our wages have stayed the same or declined. And Yanis Varoufakis talks. I like his assessment of things. He talks about cloud capital and this neo-techno-feudalism, basically that, as you outline, all of the wealth is siphoning upward to them, to these Dialog and other groups, and they're creating this two-tiered society, effectively wiping out the middle class in all nations. Basically, the trend is there. In some places, it's better, in others, not so good. So I just kind of want to mention that. I fully agree. I think that is our biggest threat: is this silent, wiping out of the middle class. And then just, I guess, going back to, you mentioned PayPal. I just read that Stripe is looking into buying PayPal. And so I think it's to our earlier point that it's just this trend that you have new companies, new iterations that do things better, and then they'll buy up the old ones and then sort of move forward from there. So it's like Stripe is sort of like PayPal 2.0, maybe we can say. And then funny, my Facebook all of a sudden had been static for half a decade at 2,000 followers. And just over the past 2 weeks, it jumped 5,000 to 7,000. I'm like, what is going on? Is DARPA Meta desperate to get me to scan my face, or just they want me to use Facebook more to depend on that as the platform, and then they'll pull the rug later again. And just one more thing before continuing, the DARPA you mentioned. I'm of the opinion that most of this stuff is, as you're nailing it, it's coming from DARPA. They create the internet, which is the first layer. It's the tubes that connect us, the piping. And then they're building all these additional layers. And then the financial layer, I think, is what's coming, which is important. As you talk about PayPal and then Stripe. And I think Bitcoin came out of DARPA. And that it's the gateway to spearhead the building of the financial layer now, and where PayPal was like the first beta version, and then Bitcoin, because now you're seeing people talking about Bitcoin being used to tokenize the world, all of our assets, if not Bitcoin, but Bitcoin and or the other cryptos. They can scale up the Ethereum network, the Bitcoin network, or they'll simply do stable coins and CBDCs. So I think this is all part of that original DARPA project: internet, financial layer, tokenization, Palantir, as you're about to get into. Just any thoughts there? Yeah.
So I agree 100%. And what I would refer to that is, broadly as economic warfare. They're waging kind of economic warfare against the population, and they're slowly and surely impoverishing the population so that the population doesn't have the resources to resist. And then they're building a financial system where they'll be able to turn off individual people by with programmable digital money, whether that is a CBDC, whether that's a stable coin, whatever it is. The goal is to get people trapped into a digital currency where there is no cash economy, there is no way for you to earn money off the books, there isn't, and they can take pesky voices like ours and they can turn off our ability to buy and sell. And then we're not going to have the ability to get this information to the public because we're not going to be able to eat. We're not going to be able to get subscriptions. We're not going to be able to get, whatever. And so this is really the importance of supporting your the alternative media, is because they're crushing us so that you're only going to get garbage and controlled opposition voices and somebody that's going to, lead you down a primrose path. Now, on the economic warfare side that you brought up, I just wanted to share this from our, from ArtOfLiberty.org/inflation. And, this is the cotillion effect and the compound trap made visible in the housing market. And so, it used to be the average way, this is, medium, household income, and median household income and the median price of a house used to track fairly well from 1950 to about 1971. And in 1971, Nixon takes the U.S. off the gold standard. That opens up the floodgates for the banks to create unlimited dollars. It opened up the federal government to create unlimited dollars. And then money starts flowing into the housing market as a hedge, and for and also just it takes more devalued dollars to buy the same amount of house, and so inflation begins hitting the housing market. The housing market's a little bit different because it's also a hedge against inflation. So money goes into houses that wouldn't have gone in otherwise because of the crooked monetary system. But now you begin to see this wide divergence between housing prices and median income to the point of where it's now retarded. And so, it had popped up into ridiculous heights in kind of 2008. 2008, the crash happens. So they pumped up the housing market. Then they pulled the rug, and they created something that was unsustainable, giving away zero income mortgages and no income, no job mortgages, and all these this crazy lending. And then when it collapses, then Fannie Mae comes along with a program called REO to rental, where they sell foreclosed homes in bulk to institutional investors, which is something that had never really happened before. And so the housing market starts to correct, and then the banks come in and they provide unlimited capital to these institutional investors. The institutional investors put it into homes that had gone down because of the crash. So they buy low, and then they crank the prices up, and the people that had to sell their homes, they now cannot afford to buy new homes. And so number one, they're now renters. Okay. So now they got to pay rent to the bank instead of own their own home. And so now they're paying to this, this organized crime system rents that they would not have had to pay if the system hadn't made housing unaffordable. And the second thing is if they were able to buy their home, now you've got to finance $300,000, $400,000. You've increased the amount of the down payment. You've increased the amount of the total percentage. And so now what you're doing is you're now, it's a way of transferring money to the exact same people that created the problem. You're now forced to borrow for an asset that, guess what, you really didn't have to borrow for historically. So you didn't really have to do that back, or borrow as much. It was like a tiny fraction compared to what you now have to buy to get yourself into a house right now. And that's the economic warfare of like what we're talking about. And this is, purchasing power of the dollar. So the more dollars that the banks create, the less the value of the purchasing power of the dollar goes down, the more of these they create. And so the system is inherently unfair, and it's stealing the value out of what society is done. So anyway, back to our crew that's making it possible. So who's behind all of this? Okay, so Thiel becomes a billionaire. He co-founds Palantir in 2003 and 2004 with Alex Karp, Joe Lonsdale, Stephen Cohen, and Nathan Gettings. They take some of PayPal's anti-fraud pattern detection capabilities to allegedly combat terrorism, and the CIA's venture arm called In-Q-Tel invests about $2 million, and that's the only outside money. And so the CIA becomes Palantir's first government customer. So again, we see another, government contract, another, CIA, DARPA, intelligence agency connection to Thiel and crew, where they become the first customer and investor for Thiel's company Palantir. Now, Palantir has embedded itself into almost every single government agency.
And then,
And is
yeah, I could just add, I mean, that's a nice graphic you have there. And there's a few, I mean, every week, if you follow the news, there are additional agencies being added. You know, the Small Business
Yep.
Association of the US, I just read last week. And then Norway's customs has integrated Palantir. The United Nations, right? The world government. I just learned recently they've got so far two agencies, the World Food Program and the IAEA. So it's just, I mean, this is taking over.
So, and this is everything from military targeting to tax records, health data, and immigration informants. You know, so this is when ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement is generating their pickup lists. Palantir is the software that is generating the list, saying go to this house and scoop up this guy, or go to this. This is who's creating the targeting lists for the government goon squads to go scoop people up off the street. Palantir is the company that generates the lists that the government goon squad uses to go pick people up off the street. And so now they've got billions of dollars. The enterprise agreement with the Army is up to $10 billion over 10 years. Is the biggest one that they've got, and then it's a variety of smaller ones. Now, the other thing that Thiel is famous for is, so he is a kingmaker, and this is a little personal point of pride of mine. And so we talked about a little bit earlier about created legends, and so Thiel has been the patron of J.D. Vance, and in my book, Government: The Biggest Scam in History, J.D. Vance, in the 5th edition that came out in 2023, before Vance had been picked to be Vice President of the United States, we identified Vance as a created legend in that edition of the book, and he's the only politician whose name appears 3 times in the book. This is a page from the book saying, hey, are you getting your news from the CIA? Where we list, a bunch of quote unquote ex-CIA people that are giving the population their news on CNN and MSNBC and CBS and ABC and NBC and whatever, and those are who the national security commentators are, and that's who the anchors are. And a lot of people don't know it, but Anderson Cooper at CNN, he was a CIA intern, and so a lot of people that you didn't even realize were that aren't being like a lot of times they'll say ex-director of the CIA or whatever. Out of the 200 people that get to talk about politics and current events and things like that on the CIA, on the news, they're connected to the CIA in ways like being an intern a quote unquote intern for 2 years before he began traveling the world. As a correspondent, he was a CIA intern. And not only was J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance was supported by Thiel. J.D. Vance was essentially given a VC fund by Thiel, Narya Investments, which, guess what, makes investments into a lot of the defense technologies and things, again, privatizing the profits with an offshoot spin. But it also created the legend of Vance as a businessman and as a venture capitalist. So they made him we're creating the legend of Vance. And so then are you getting your politicians from the CIA? So he was given $15 million by Thiel to win his Senate seat in Ohio, which is a perennial, swing state. And so he's essentially elevated by Thiel and inserted into the Senate, and then is now inserted into the vice presidency. And I've publicly predicted that he will be the next president of the United States. And we identified him as an asset back in 2023 before he was even a senator. And the reason that I was able to do that, and the reason is because I watched them creating the legend of J.D. Vance. So they gave him a best-selling New York Times book. and they made it a movie with Ron Howard right before his Senate campaign. And they made him a commentator on CNN. Okay, so they're pumping up his thing so he can be installed into the Senate. I realized the connection between CIA, Peter Thiel, and Vance. I wrote about it in the book, and lo and behold, when he's president of the United States, remember where you heard it first. And so I break down in this, in this visualization / meme, I break down the connections between Thiel and Vance and all of the evidence that Vance was created by the agency, installed. So I think that Thiel is an agency guy that's been given this money, that's been, made a billionaire and is then making these investments and control and running these groups and controlling these companies. And we're going to get into, we'll get into that here in a second. But that's kind of who Thiel is. He also put $15 million into Blake Masters' Senate campaign. Thiel sits on the Bilderberg Steering Committee. So Dialog is only one of kind of two organizations where he has a major influence. Bilderberg is the other one. We'll get into that in a second. But the big idea here is dialogue. And so now we get to, so what happens? So really the big idea among dialogue is not just the 140 people, 1,000 people that are attending dialogue, a lot of whom, by the way, are not nefarious. So there's a lot of eye candy and there's a lot of misdeception. So we're going to invite people like Josh Brolin, and we're going to invite artists, and we're going to invite people that aren't affiliated with anything nefarious at all, as a kind of screen for what's going on in the other room. Oh no, we're not plotting anything. We're not coordinating, the censorship of the internet across, over a dozen companies. That's not what's going on here. We're talking with Josh Brolin about, what it's like to be an actor, and we're talking about the arts, and we're talking about stuff like that. And so a lot of the people at Dialog aren't necessarily nefarious. They're like, what's known as a porch mason. And a porch mason is, like most of the, Freemasonry is another one of these organizations where the majority of the members don't have anything to do with the nefarious things going on in the back, but there are networks that utilize the lodge system and the secrecy, and it's the lodge's ability to project power around the world. But that's only known to higher level initiates. The porch masons, they don't know anything about it. And so there's probably the equivalent of dialogue where they're not going to go get into it. But in the bigger level, this was, so two decades of secret meetings. Now let's talk about who's attending these secret meetings.
Just real quick on that. So a lot of us, we all have limited bandwidth and we can't know everything. And, many of us have followed Trilateral, Bilderberg throughout the years. And I think this follows, for example, the Bilderberg pattern, where it was in 1954, they first met, and for decades, no one knew anything about them, because that was the old days of analog media, number one. And then, eventually in the late 20th century, people do more digging. Alt media comes around, the internet. They're forced to produce the Bilderberg website. And then was it WikiLeaks and Public Intelligence, I think, the website, where eventually they had a large swath of Bilderberg meeting minutes in PDF form published, I think, primarily by Public Intelligence from like the 50s to not every year, but virtually every year. And then I looking at, at Pentagonpedia I'm using here, but Dialog, like you said, 2006, that is incredible that for 20 years they've been quiet. And I was looking at one of the other founders, Orrin Hoffman. He was my neighbor. I lived in Deerfield, Illinois as a kid for a number of years. And he's from Highland Park, which is right next door to Deerfield. And so it's just wild to think some of these people were just, when they were young, they were just, living, they would have been one of my neighbors. And now here he is at the helm of Dialog anyways.
So, you know what? It's funny. years ago, I was researching the Bohemian Society, and I was looking through a Bohemian Grove, registry, and one of my ex-girlfriend's dads was a member. He was a banker. He owned multiple savings and loans and everything like that. And I'm like, oh my God, I've literally had dinner at this guy's house and sat across the table with him and everything like that. And just never knew. I knew that they were, very wealthy and everything like that, but I just never knew, it's funny how enmeshed in society they are. Now, to your point, that was the perfect segue, because one of the things that exposed the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission, and the extent of their penetration of the United States government. So really, the CFR was the first organization to penetrate the cabinet. The famous quote by Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, was the World Economic Forum penetrates the cabinets. Well, before the World Economic Forum was penetrating anything, the Council on Foreign Relations was penetrating the cabinets. And this visualization right here, this is a 2011 chart from a group called the Foundation to Restore an Educated Electorate. And this thing went viral in the truth community of 2010, 2011. Also, Patrick Wood's book, Trilaterals over, Washington, D.C. became a kind of underground bestseller. And that's really where these organizations, people began to realize, hey, there is a power behind the throne. And what this chart is showing is it's showing, we'll take a look at the presidents, is going back in time. Okay, it's showing the position, the presidency, the vice presidency, the Federal Reserve System, the Council on Economic Advisors, the CIA directors, the Export-Import Bank, cabinet officials penetrating the cabinet. Here's Secretary of State. And so there's the person's name, and then there's either a B, a C, or a T next to their name. And so they're either Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, or Trilateral Commission, or like Clinton, he's all three. Okay, so Clinton is Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission. Before Clinton, there was George Herbert Walker Bush. He was Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. Before George Herbert Walker Bush, there was James Earl Carter. Carter was Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. Before Carter, there was Ford. Ford was Bilderberg and Council on Foreign Relations. And so what you're seeing is going back in time through both Republican and Democrat administrations, every single major, power center in the federal government is held by a member of one of these three organizations, okay? And all three of these organizations are not only represented at Dialog, but it is the leadership of the organization that is represented at Dialog, which then makes the power of Dialog exponentially greater than I think people realize, because it's not just the individual members, it's the organization that leadership represents. It's the power and the network behind that organization as well. And that's huge. So that's really the thing that I haven't seen anybody really, reporting on. In fact, I've seen Dialog really been ignored, even though this is it. This is so now let's get in. So who is it? So broadly speaking, the organizations that have been caught is the Council on Foreign Relations. 25% of the 140 members that we analyzed are members of the CFR. 35 of the 140, if you include Tulsi Gabbard, who was a CFR member but isn't on the list because she's the current serving, DNI. And so the leadership is Robert Rubin, who was a Secretary of Treasury. Keep that in mind, the people creating the money. Remember, we're going to get into, so we're going to talk about the big buckets, and then we're going to talk about, why do you think that they're behind this stealing of the value out of everybody's money, Etienne. We'll get into that in a second. But so Robert Rubin, Chairman Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and former Secretary of the Treasury and a Wall Street banker. Richard Haas, President Emeritus of the CFR, Peggy Hamburg, who is a director, Henry Kravis, who is also is a former director, and again a private equity investor deploying money into companies and buying up the world for the cartel. The Bilderberg Group, 10% of known attendees, 14 out of the 140. Summers, Thiel, Karp, Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, the head of Google, who will figure very prominently in what we're about to get into. Kravis again, Driscoll, Reed Hoffman, Kushner, Tugendhat, Palmer, Lucky, who we'll get into. Brett Stevens, Callis. So again, Andreessen, we'll get into him, little weasel. So what are the key Bilderberg leadership at Dialog? So again, it's Alex Karp is a steering committee member, Eric Schmidt is a steering committee member, Peter Thiel is a steering committee member. So now we've got the entire Bilderberg organization behind them. To give you an idea of the power of that, this is a visualization that has been kind of kicking around for years on the internet without good attribution, but I've kind of blown it up, and you can see kind of individual members here, and then this connects to the companies and their board level connections. And so a lot of the Bilderberg Group hold board level seats, hold C-level seats at some of the most powerful and in many ways crooked, as many of them are multiple felons. Almost every bank on Wall Street is a multiple felon, convicted of felonies. And so this gives you an idea of the power of just me showing you one little screenshot. Now, the World Economic Forum, which penetrates the cabinets, is 10%, so another 14 out of 140. And so this is another visualization, showing, the penetration and the participation of essentially all of the political puppets, including Vladimir Putin, including China, including Ukraine, including Israel, including Greece. So we're organizing politicians, upcoming politicians, next generation politicians. We're running the Young Global Leader program, which is like a talent identification program where they can take people like, Thiel, who got slotted into things like PayPal, things like Facebook, things like Palantir, and we can slot them in either in a media role. We can slot them in a government politician role. We can slot them in a banking role, whatever it is. But again, another organization that is having regular meetings around the world in secure facilities, because if you want to run the world, you got to have meetings. And so then we talked about Berggruen. Berggruen is a 3.6% overlap, and represented by Nicholas himself. So the founder and the chairman of Berggruen is an attendee at Dialog. Berggruen is the son of German-Jewish art dealer Heinz Berggruen. He studied finance at NYU, and he built a $2 to $3 billion fortune through Berggruen Holdings with major bets in real estate, retail, and media. And so you're going to see media people and media networks. And so Berggruen is an owner of a media network. And Robert Maxwell was an owner of a media network. And now CIA-connected Larry Ellison is the owner of a media network. And so you're going to see this domination of the media by these same group of people. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind just for a second, I wanted to share something. If you could stop your share.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we don't have a screw up. I've had that happen in the past on the screen record. And just on that, I wanted to add on Berggruen. That's your article. And again, the parallels to Bilderberg. Apparently Dialog.org, they have a website, but it's just one page with nothing there. And that reminds me, when Bilderberg, I think in the 2010s, was it maybe Bilderberg just created vanilla sort of website. So Dialog has done that. And then the other point was, again, I think the spider web is large, and it's not per se. It's a hierarchy, right? So you've been detailing Peter Thiel, so he's Eric Schmidt. Those guys are higher up in the hierarchy, and I think Burguin is making his way there. And I found this article from 2011 in Hispanidad.com website. It's in Spanish. This is the auto translation, and it talks about Burguin. Where is it? Here it is. It says here that his group wanted to replace Trilateral Commission or the Bilderberg Group. And Berggruen is based, he's got his centers or institutes, one in California, I forget exactly where, obviously Silicon Valley, all that. One in Italy, you think Venetian nobility type stuff, right? Rome. And one in China, because China is the new multipolar world order. And then I just thought, where was it? Was it your website? No, on the Wikipedia Dialog, it says Dialog has held events in Baccara Resort in California, where Berggruen happens to have one of his headquarters. They had another event in Venice, Italy, also where Berggruen has his second headquarters, and then his third, China. And then Arizona was another one. So it's interesting to see these overlaps. And then I found this X account, Red Panda Koala. They created a searchable list of the Dialog group. And again, you go through it. It sounds like you're reading another Bilderberg member list, because you've got their international, CEO of Mercury, Imad Akhund, King Faisal, Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's literally like Bilderberg 2.0. And, like a snake, when it sheds its skin, it's like the Bilderberg skin has been shed, and now it's Dialog. And then what was, I think, one of the other final points in the, actually, if you go to the Dialog Wikipedia, they cite this source, someone who wrote a piece it's useful, for Neo-Foundation.org, Gerardo Spagnuolo. And he says, if the Bilderberg Group with its public minutes has decayed into a mere glamorous discussion forum, Dialog represents the occult vanguard of an ongoing techno-political offensive. And basically, I think your work and this other stuff points to Dialog being sort of the current forum at the helm of, basically at the helm of this algorithmic neo-feudalism. But I'll stop there, and you can continue.
No, you nailed it, and just to reemphasize what you just said. So in the beginning, there was the Council on Foreign Relations. Then there was the Trilateral Commission to take the model, what was a national model, and now turn it into an international model. Okay. And then Bilderberg became kind of like the like something that, the CFR was originally like a policy shop for the government, and Bilderberg turned it into the, kind of the C-level executives for these cartel companies. So the bankers create money out of thin air. They provide unlimited capital to certain companies to buy up and consolidate their own industries, whether that industry is media, or whether that industry is mining, or whether that industry is retail, or whether that industry is you name it. And so then those C-level executives then get organized into these multinational policy shops where they're now able to give their marching orders, whether that marching order is everybody's going along with the COVID, whether that marching order is that we're going to be supporting Republicans this season and Democrats next season, whether that whatever that is, that this is where you're able to coordinate thousands of companies, and with hundreds and hundreds of participants. And again, Dialog brings together not just the heads of companies, but the heads of these organizations that then have In some cases, like the Council on Foreign Relations, thousands of members. In some cases, like Berggruen, hundreds of members. In some cases, like the Trilateral Commission, hundreds of members. And so it's bringing together the heads of these that then control these other networks. So to continue, all right. This is some of the members of Berggruen's 21st Century Council, and again, it ranges from Gordon Brown to the head of Jack Dorsey, the head of Twitter and Square, Francis Fukuyama. You get some of them are eye candy, some of them are real attendees. But now let's get to the kind of the meat and potatoes. So what do they? So now you understand that they're representing these other organizations that are also coordinating policy activity and the media and other important people. But what do they have in common that gets back to, okay, it's the bankers at the top and they're buying up the media and they're algorithmically censoring the internet? Well, at the top, it's the bankers, again, riding herd over the meetings in the same way that we kind of showed in this visualization right here. And to your point, so I got sidetracked, but Harvey, this is the thing that exposed Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg, and then that created the World Economic Forum. The COVID exposed the World Economic Forum, which forced, Berggruen. So now we're setting up the next one for when the coordination becomes painfully obvious, like it was among the World Economic Forum during the COVID, as an example that we can switch to another meeting. Dialog was actually hidden for 2 decades, and so they haven't had to switch it yet, and so we're now cracking it kind of wide open. But I think you're absolutely right. The snake sheds its skin once people realize what color the snake is. And so Scott Bessent is the current Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. So he is essentially presiding over the policy that the Treasury is creating unlimited dollars, even though it's stealing the value out of your dollars. Before he was doing it, Larry Summers was a former Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. He was also CFR. He's Bilderberg. He's a World Economic Forum agenda contributor. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission. And he was connected to Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein network. Peter Thiel is connected to Epstein and the Epstein network. We can talk about that in a little bit, but it's they've met in person on multiple times. They've had dinner together. Thiel's been invited to the island and allegedly hasn't gone, but who knows if he did or he didn't. But Thiel is mentioned over 2,000 times in the Epstein papers. And so the Epstein network is widely believed to be the Rothschild network. Epstein was a Rothschild agent. So Thiel is connected to a network of bankers so it's the banks and the Treasury that are creating the money. It's the central banks that enable it. The Rothschild network is connected to all of these networks. Epstein was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, of the Bilderberg Group, of the Trilateral Commission, all 3 of those. And he's connected to Thiel. He invested in some of Thiel's funds. I think he invested over $40 million in Valor Ventures, I believe is the name of the specific investment that he made. But so we've got Thiel, we've got Summers, a former Secretary of Treasury, we've got the current Secretary of the Treasury. We have Robert Rubin, who was the head of who was the Chairman Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and Secretary of the Treasury, and he was on the Citigroup board, and he's a banker. And then we have so the banks are creating money, the Fed is backstopping it. The Treasury is in on it too, and here is the whole crew that is the primary beneficiaries. You don't get any higher on the totem pole than these guys benefiting from the policy of money creation than what you're seeing, right here. Okay, this is it. Randy Krosner, his name has come out, and by the way, these are only the people that have come out publicly. So there's most likely many, many more names to come. But just right off the bat, and just the 140 that we've analyzed, we've got the absolute, kingpins of creating money out of nothing, even though it's stealing the value out of your money. From the banking side, from the Treasury side, and from the Federal Reserve side, just represented in these four names that we know, and to the Rothschild network through Epstein, which had a connection to all three organizations and to Peter Thiel. Now, this is from that visualization that kind of broke open these connections in 2011. This is the same pattern for the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission. Is the bankers are riding herd over those organizations as well. And so they're very, very well represented at the chairman level of Goldman Sachs, of Bank of America, of Bankers Trust, of Brown Brothers Harriman, of JP Morgan Chase, of Citigroup. You're seeing the chairman and the CEO level participating in all of these organizations. You're seeing the Federal Reserve Board of Governors system participating at this level in all of these organizations. You're seeing the Export-Import Bank, you're seeing the IMF, you're seeing the World Bank, and you're seeing the secretaries of the Treasury. I put a D there, because you could, one of the things that we did is we took the Dialog list and we overlaid it and we showed you who's connected to who. But this is the exact same thing that's going on in this Dialog, is the bankers and the central bankers are riding herd over everybody else. Okay, because they got the purse, they've got the money. Okay, now the next major group that's represented at Dialog is something that I call Operation Mockingbird 2.0. And so we talked earlier, the most powerful weapon on the planet is control of the media. We talked about the CIA news network and the fact that the CIA, out of the 200 people that are allowed to talk politics on the television, here's a couple dozen of them that are, quote unquote, ex-CIA admitted, not including the ones that are not admitted. Okay. But just the, 2 dozen out of the 200 or so that you get to see talking about politics, a lot of them are CIA. And so the name Mockingbird is not an official, it's rumored to be the name of the program, but that is not been proven. It's widely known as Operation Mockingbird. It's also known as Wisner's Wurlitzer or the Mighty Wurlitzer. And so that was that was the name of the CIA's capability to widely control the media. And this came out in congressional hearings held in 1976 called the Church Committee. And in the Church Committee hearings, it came out that the CIA had a network of hundreds and hundreds of reporters, editors, and publishers that would play whatever tune the CIA wanted to be played. So that's that's why they call it the Wurlitzer. Frank Wisner was the CIA executive that ran the program. They called it Wisner's Wurlitzer because he could get the media to play any tune that he wanted. Do you want everybody saying there's a pandemic even though there's obviously not? I'll just play. I'll call up my friends on Wisner's Rolodex, and we'll play the Mighty Wurlitzer, and every single media outlet will be telling you that there's a pandemic going on, even if there's not a pandemic going on.
And can we go one step further? You don't really get into that in this article, but I bring it up often that, like, the cutting edge of this Operation Mockingbird 2.0 is now the independent media space, right? And there's a lot of whatever you want to call it, controlled opposition, and that I call it the legacy alternative media. So there's this tier now, which is the biggest, the tier one, top tier of alternative media, independent media, the podcast space. And I'm not going to say everyone in that tier is. I've said this before. It's like a spectrum in terms of motivations of the people participating. Some of them do it unwittingly, some wittingly. But I'd say it's like Tucker Carlson, it's Sean Ryan podcast,
Yes.
This Chinese professor Zhang, Kim Iverson. I like her work, but she's in that tier now. Again, I don't know what her motivation is, and I don't put the spotlight on her, but just that tier, like Alex Jones, as we've talked about before. So would you sort of agree that redacted news, which is the people are pointing out, it's interesting that they were involved in fraud type stuff, and then all of a sudden they gotta get off the hook. And I often think the deal is that they find someone who's good at doing this, and then we'll forget about your fraud if you just kind of do this sort of thing. No.
So with Sean Ryan, you nailed it. So here we got another CIA guy. Okay, admitted ex-CIA guy that has been given, a world-class studio, producers, world-class gear, world-class equipment, and is having most likely the gears turned up on his program on Facebook. So we'll tweak it on Facebook up at the same time that we'll take the authentic voices of the real alternative media and we'll turn it down. And, we'll get the most talented people that we can, and we'll have them talking about everything that doesn't matter except the fact that the average person is going to have between 1.4 and 1.96 million dollars stolen from them over the lifetime. They're going to be talking about, children's games played by adults. They're going to be talking about potential poll shifts. They're going to be talking about anything to take the population. We're singing and dancing, and to not be talking about what's really going on, who's really behind it, like we're doing, right here. And so that is the strategy. It's to dominate the airwaves with very, very talented people that in some cases will take you down the path a little bit, and then they're going to gatekeep you, or they're going to steer you into a dead end, or they're going to try and sell you something that, like the Shemitah, that's going to make you look dumb to your friends and family because you repeated an agency talking point that was designed to make you look dumb to your friends and family.
Or just thinking the recent example is how Tucker Carlson, he was being interviewed. And he was playing up Vance. I mean, given everything you've mentioned, which I agree with, Tucker Carlson was like, I know Vance. He's a good guy. He'd make a good president. And then Tucker wanting to lead the charge on a third party. And, your whole philosophy, and, I agree with it too. That's just continuing the fake, left-right system. And this third party would just be more of the same. Right.
Well, we call it an intergenerational organized crime system. And Tucker Carlson is the son of the guy who ran the media operation of USAID, or what is it?
Radio Liberty.
Radio Liberty was a subset of the program.
Voice of
America and Radio Liberty.
Radio Free Europe.
Radio for Europe, but those were even sub points. Like the entire media spectrum that was the government's media operation that entailed foreign language newspapers, foreign language radio stations, foreign language. Tucker Carlson's dad was dominating the airwaves around the world for the U.S. organized crime government before they created Tucker Carlson and they gave him the media training, and it is an intergenerational system. And Tucker Carlson's not going to be telling you about the Dialog Society, and Tucker Carlson's not going to be telling you like a great many things. But that ability to create it was called, widely known as Operation Mockingbird. And guess what we have in Dialog is we've got kind of the exact same thing and the exact same people, and it's not just individual reporters. And so a lot of people speculate that the reason that they called it Operation Mockingbird is because if you control the head ends of the information food chain. So, if you control the policy level editorial opinions of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune at one time and the LA Times, you controlled almost all the regional papers around them, because those regional papers are frequently either syndicating or just mockingbirding what they read in the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal or the editorial page of the New York Times or the editorial page of the Washington Post, or from the main stories, the feature editors and the feature reporters. What they're writing, most regional papers would mockingbird, and then most people that don't really think for themselves, they're going to mockingbird whatever they read in the New York Times or in the Washington Post or in the the Wall Street Journal. And so if you control those, that's very advantageous.
Yeah, I've seen that recently, just looking at you see exclusives on the latest, the Houthis now in Yemen want to charge tolls, right? Which is, we're getting into clown world here, but exclusive Reuters or Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal. And then you see mainline papers of other countries. Like I just saw the example the other day of Times of Israel writing the article about the Houthis wanting to charge the toll there, and they're referring to the Reuters exclusive. So it's just the perfect example of what you're talking about.
So who do we have at Dialog? Is we've got New York, the kind of the name folks at the New York Times at the columnist level, New York Times. We've got the CEO of the Atlantic, the ex-editor-in-chief of Wired, CFR. But in addition to kind of the tier one, the national security correspondent for the Washington Post. So in addition to having in addition to having kind of individual top tier reporters at these information head ends like the New York Times and the Washington Post, we've also got people that are running entire media networks. And so Isaac Lee runs Hybe America, former board member of the Associated Press. He's got an entire media network behind him. Vit Dinglinger, who is now retired, but he was the chief operating officer of the Bauer Media Group, which, employed more than 11,000 people across 13 countries. I'm assuming he was probably running it when he was attending Dialog meetings, because they've been going on for 2 years. He's retired now. Now he's a member of the Austrian Parliament. But even more significant is Eric Schmidt, who is a Bilderberg member, and Richard Haas at the CFR, because, as I mentioned, they're running their own organizations. They're running the Bilderberg Group and they're running the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group have dozens and dozens and dozens of reporters, editors at ostensibly independent media organizations ranging from the New York Times, the New York Post, to Fox News, to NBC News, to The Economist, to Time Magazine, to the Times of London, to the Washington Post, to CNN, to CBS, to Warner Brothers, to ABC News, to Disney, to Newsweek, to the Daily Beast, to the AP, to USA Today, to, you get the idea, The Sun, Sky News, Politico, you name it, Slate, U.S. News and World Report. I could go on. I think you're getting the idea. And so this is what I'm talking about through the exponential power of having the leadership of the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg represented at Dialog. You're essentially talking about their power and their network as well. And those organizations are simultaneously and similarly, because if you want to rob the world, you have to have meetings. They're having private meetings in secure facilities that have likely been swept for bugs, where they're giving their marching orders. And when you take a look at this media list of prostitutes and liars, Okay, and by the way, we've got the high-res version at artofliberty.org/white-rose. You can see this poster that we created in our White Rose poster series. You can actually see the high-res version. You can see who all of these individual reporters, editors, and publishers are. But these are the people that sold you the COVID. These are the people that sold you that the U.S. was attacked in the Gulf of Tonkin. These are the people that sold you Kuwaiti babies tossed out of incubators. These are the people that sold you weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. These are the people that sold you weapons of mass destruction in Iran. These are the people that sold you the official story of 9/11. These are the people that sold you the official story of the Waco massacre. These are the people that sold you the official story of Waco or of Ruby Ridge. These are the people that sold you the official story of the Oklahoma City bombing. This is the media, this is representing the media system that is lying. Now,
and just this last part, if I could just to preamble again the last part of your article, if you just stop your share for a second, just want to.
Absolutely, go ahead. Yeah. I love it. I love that we're going back and forth like this.
Yeah, just load it. Okay, here's the last part of the article again, and we're coming to the algorithm ghetto part where you're talking about AI-driven autonomous weapon systems, drones, Terminator robots, AI targeting, and they're building out Skynet. By the way, I was going to mention this earlier, but just another example confirming your thesis. James Lee, the popular content creator, he just tweeted, "We're living under hyperinflation, but nobody wants to admit it." You were showing housing, and here's the grocery shopping is going exponential, but. And something else, Kim Iverson did do a excellent segment the other day on they're calling it tech dollar. I think she riffed off of Alistair Crook. I'm questioning it the techno dollar because the petrodollar. This is Bretton Woods 3.0. It's the techno dollar. And basically, instead of forcing everyone to sell oil in dollars, they're going to force everyone to use their AI systems, to use the Israeli surveillance systems, to use the Bitcoin dollar, stablecoin dollar. That is Bretton Woods 3.0, I think. And just to go off of what you're saying, like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like the Doom video game was real. They're literally summoning the demon and opening the gates. I just came across this yesterday. It's real. Satirus.com. They're creating this centaur robot. It's got a chainsaw. It's like a half Baphomet with 4 legs. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Like, this is real. So it's like Doom. We're going to be living in the Doom where they open up the portal and the demons from Mars enter planet Earth. And this is insane. And then one of my listeners, Burning Beard, who does excellent work, he's an Orthodox Christian, and he says, not sure which is worse, Centaur bots or these liquid robots. Dubai Future Foundation. This is from today posted. Robots that merge, reshape, and flow like liquid were supposed to be fiction. Real life liquid robots were unthinkable years ago, but scientists just proved otherwise. Applications go far beyond the movies imagines. That is a joint team at Seoul National University. So they're working on Terminator 2 style liquid robots. And then this just dropped. I got this from one of my past guests, Mike Driver. Orchid, the first, I won't play the clip, but you play the clip, and basically the app does everything for you. It organizes your entire life. Like, you don't have to think, you don't have to plan. It does everything absolutely for you. So anyway, that was my little preamble to get your thoughts on where we're going. So everything you've discussed, Dialog now is at the helm, at the hierarchy of, or one of the groups, maybe there are others like Dialog, who knows, that they're now building out this entire apparatus. The Palantir, the Flock. Okay, Flock was the Hegelian dialectic for Exxon now, right? And so they're building out this entire system, the digital payments systems and whatnot. Was it Bangladesh just rolled out their QR code? They want to get rid of the cash, so they're forcing upon us the QR codes. Russia's forcing Max app messenger on everyone. as for the Russians for their payment system. Bangladesh, here in Mexico, shine bombs trying to get rid of cash, right? So
I think they're in a race against us, against the people that are exposing it. And I feel like we really are in a race to expose it and to get this information out to the public so that we can stop it, and so that we can arrest these people and we can get on with our lives, and we can, and get rid of government, the control system that is allowing them to do this. Like government is the system that is forcing the acceptance of the rapidly depreciating U.S. dollar and forcing you to use their money. Government, like that is the system. And guess what? As long as they keep everybody trapped in that worldview that sorry, all you can do is vote harder, and then there's nothing that you can do. It's game over. There's no way to win the game at all. Versus, here at the Art of Liberty Foundation, we call it the one-way revolution. And if you understand that the whole thing is a scam, that government itself is illegitimate, it's immoral, the only way to win is not to play, that you really don't owe the government of Washington, D.C. any money at all, that the government is being puppeteered behind the scenes by groups like Dialog and by bankers and Treasury officials and things like that, meeting in secret with media heads and controlling the information that you receive, well, then you're in a way more powerful position, because you're not trapped in a no-win game anymore. And so what I think it is it's a race. Can we, expose the truth and then have government's ability, the belief in government, the belief in the legitimacy of government and the necessity of government. If that falls away, that takes away all their power. There's nothing they can do about it. There's no way to stop that. There's no way to stop, you having a conversation with your friends and your family over the dinner table talking about, hey, the scam from the beginning is that government's legitimate. It's been a brute force manufactured consensus. And if we all quit, paying attention to it, and we ignore it to the extent that you can, or, it loses a lot of its power. It can't force us into anything. We're not going to go along with you. We don't believe that it's legitimate. It's an easily rigged system. You're exercising hierarchical control over the entire country through a system that you imposed on us, and then you indoctrinated the population into. We're no longer participating. That's the way that you win. And so now we're in this race, and that's a good segue again, because what are they doing? They're algorithmically censoring this on the DARPA internet. And so what I'm showing here right now is a map of the internet, two maps of the internet. This is what the internet looked like in 1969. This is what the internet looked like in 1982. And so remember, the population really didn't get the internet till about 1996, 1994. You began seeing dial-up providers and things pop up. They had the internet. Here's the Pentagon. Here's Harvard. Here's Stanford, the RAND Corporation, Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. They had the internet for a long, long, long time before you had the internet. They had already figured out what the internet was going to look like. They had already figured out that there was going to be social media. They'd already figured out that there was going to be wireless transmission of money through things like PayPal. They'd already figured out how the internet was going to roll out. And then they began placing their bets and stealing the value out of the money, that knowledge that you paid for. So the taxpayer paid for all this research. The taxpayer paid for this network right here. And then they went and they privatized all the profits. And so in the article that I mentioned, which is linked to in this article at ArtOfLiberty.Foundation, so you can find this article at ArtOfLiberty.Foundation, you're going to see this article, How the CIA Made Google, and it breaks down how Richard O'Neill, a U.S. Navy cryptologist, wrote a paper for the Naval War College called a methodology for perception management. So we got to manage perception, and we got to manage it with a strategy so that we dominate our adversaries, we dominate the information reaching our potential partners, and we dominate it to civilian populations so that they perceive that the cost is worth the effort of our partners. Like, we got to make the people in Great Britain, believe that the reason that we're going to war in Iran is going to benefit the people of Great Britain because they're going to have nuclear weapons or whatever, so that we can get our allies to go along with it. So we're going to have to dominate information all over the planet. And so then that went up, that paper got traction, and then they began building a strategy around perception management that was managed by the Highland Group and the Highland Forum. And so this is a media ownership map from back in 2009, showing in 2009 there were only 6 companies running hundreds of subsidiaries. These like little lists right here are kind of subsidiary corporations. And so, and this is also at ArtOfLiberty.org/white-rose. But News Corp doesn't just own, Fox News. News Corp owns satellite networks. News Corp owns newspapers, magazines, internet properties, book publishers, television programming, television production. This is General Electric, an arms manufacturer that also happens to own NBC and the New York Times, and everything from film production to internet properties to parks and resorts. You get the idea. They own the means of production. The graphic on the Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations dominations of the media is we own the people that are actually talking on the means of production. But then the internet comes along, and then what are we going to do about the internet? And so Google, understand the first people doing search, was the military itself. So there was a program called Echelon. Echelon, if you've ever seen a U.S. embassy overseas, you see it's covered in radio masts and microwaves, and it's scooping up all of this, information from around the world. It's tapping undersea, network cables, and all of that information has to be keyword searched and keyword indexed. So the first people that were doing search before Google was a glint in anybody's eye was the military. Now the military can't come out with a search engine and then expect people to use it. And so Google becomes the public-facing story, the legend of, it's created in a garage, whatever, but it was really being financed by DARPA. It was being financed through the Highland Group. And what is Google doing? Google, this is an article from Columbia Journalism Review, where they figured out that Google News is steering all of the traffic at Google News to a small handful of sources that happen to be, guess what? Populated with the same CIA guys that we talked about earlier at CNN. So the number one source traffic is going to CIA CNN, which has the densest collection of quote unquote former CIA people out there. New York Times, Washington Post, 2 Dialog members. You're getting the idea. So
just on that, again, going back to Laurel Canyon 2.0 and our podcast space, all of a sudden, Tucker Carlson was Fox, and then you've got Tucker and Sean Ryan, and all day long they're just interviewing spooks, ex-CIA this, ex-CIA that.
Special forces operators, CIA, got like the United States, because if it wasn't for the military and the intelligence agencies, that there would be nukes cooking off in cities all over the world on a daily basis. Thank God for our brave men and women in the military and the intelligence agencies. If not for Tom Cruise and for Top Gun Maverick and for Ethan Hawke and all these different things, like we'd be screwed if it wasn't for the intelligence agencies, when it's really the intelligence agencies are stealing $2 million from the average person over their lifetime and their retirement. And so they've got to hide that fact. And so these are the organizations. So Google is steering it to the old school media in one form of censorship. At the same time, they're algorithmically censoring, others. So now let's get to Dialog. And so on the new media side, so, we talked about like the old media, the print and thing, which is still relevant, but really the people that have the main power on the information battlefield of the future are people that have large scale algorithmic content ranking and moderation power, where they have the ability to turn off voices like Facebook, when Facebook culled off the Free State Project that had 3 million plus followers on Facebook, and they just turned them off, and then Basler built it back up, and then they turned him off again, and he built it back up, and they turned him off the third time, and so they're able to just turn off anybody that they don't want the population to hear from, including you and I and others, at the same time that they're able to twist up the knobs for Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan and other controlled opposition voices. So who is at Dialog that would fit into that bucket? Oh, look, we got Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, who was there during the build out of its search ranking and YouTube moderation systems. So this is literally the guy that built this capability at Google. You've got Neil Mohan, the CEO of YouTube, which is notorious for either, kicking people off YouTube, demonetizing videos, turning off videos, especially during the COVID. You could not talk about anything, or they would cancel you. They would delete all your content as well. You've got Yasmin Green, the CEO of Jigsaw, which is Google's incubator and leads the Google unit building tools to counter disinformation. Okay, so she's literally the person that counters disinformation for Google, and served on Institute's Commission on Information Disorder. So like, you get the idea. Oh, look, it's Tom Liu, global affairs lead, Google's Frontier AI division. So managed policy during Gemini's launch, where the image generator produced historically absurd and biased images due to over-aggressive diversity enforcement. So this is the clown that was, forcing, black Nazis and, female soldiers and all kinds of crazy stuff that was coming out of the AI generation, because they had a switch called woke, and they turned woke up to 11, and Gemini began building it. And so, these are some of the guys. Reid Hoffman. Okay. Reid Hoffman was a documented funder of social media influence operations. He financed something called Project Birmingham, which was a 2017 false flag disinformation effort. You can search engine that and get that. And also he runs LinkedIn, so they can turn up your career, they can turn down your career, they can do whatever. Jonathan Greenblatt is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. So now you've got the Rothschild Israeli Zionist connection, comes into Dialog, in addition to the Epstein connection. And so, the Anti-Defamation League flags online content and lobbies platforms over moderation decisions. So these are there's an entire infrastructure behind working with the platforms, where they've got a relationship with the platforms, where when the ADL says we want to turn this guy off, he's an extremist. He's talking about Zionism. He's talking about that Israel is manipulating the government of the United States because AIPAC is spending $100 million in election cycle, which is, you're not allowed to talk about that, because that's anti-Semitism to say that a foreign power is literally controlling the election process of the United States and spending $100 million per cycle to do so. We got to turn that guy off. This is the guy that's doing that. Mark Andreessen, okay, let's move over here. He is the founder and general partner of Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z. He's a Bilderberg member. He's an investor and board of multiple social media platforms caught algorithmically censoring Facebook, Quora, X, and Medium are examples. He also was part of, so last year, Substack in, I think it was July, took $100 million investment led by a group of investors from a firm called Bond. The Bond, get it, haha, James Bond intelligence agencies, that some of the partners of the Bond fund are, one of them is an ex-In-Q-Tel guy, so the CIA's venture arm, so connected to CIA Intel. And another one sits on the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Board. Okay, so two of the partners are connected to the Defense Innovation Board and CIA Google. A group that I think it's the Chernin Group and Andreessen brought in $100 million into Substack. The Art of Liberty Foundation had been doubling and in some years almost tripling on Substack for 3 years in a row. And once that $100 million came in, it's like somebody flipped a switch and we got turned off on Substack. We're spending $20,000 and we've been building it out over the past 2 months to build our own platform to move off of Substack because of the censorship that came in with Andreessen's money, just to give you an idea of that this is fresh as today's headlines. We've got Elon Musk, the owner of X. Okay, so X is the largest social media platform. Again, not just notorious for, censoring and algorithmically censoring and shadow banning and things like that. They can turn somebody up, they can turn them down, but also wasting your time. So anybody that's been to X knows that they're putting content on X designed to waste your time and to suck your time away and to get you, they curate, they take the best of what they know people like and then they curate it so that you're wasting your time. And they take Musk, who we believe is DARPA's boy, that takes technologies developed on the Pentagon's dime and DARPA's dime and then privatizes the profits for defense insiders and pulls scams like they just, pulled on the IPO and fleeced retail stock investors and the SpaceX IPO and other crimes. We think that's the front man who then, because they've made him the alleged wealthiest man in the world, there is behavioral psychology and psychology dynamics that people, most people are psychologically predisposed to pay attention to what high status monkeys do, higher status people do. And so you put him at the top of this social media thing and people are going to be predisposed to read what he does, be influenced by what he does. That's how they tricked retail investors out of all that money. That's the capability that they have built. That's why he's a front man. That's why he's been given these companies. But if you take a look at the portfolio companies that he's representing, technologies that the military is using and is interested in, and he has received over $19 billion in government contracts. There wouldn't be an Elon Musk without these $19 billion contracts or the tax credits for the electronic vehicles. That is all. He was created by the government, and he is privatizing profits on technology invented by you. Starlink is a military, the same way that the internet was a military network that they let people use so they can tax and trace and track you. Starlink is Internet 2.0. That's the next generation internet. He is the front man behind what is a military network that is being used for military purposes all over the world today, was being used in Ukraine, was being used for targeting, is being used for drones, is providing military capabilities to battlefields today. He is a military, an intelligence agency connected guy.
Yeah. Greg, just before we jump, I just want to add, we're recording now on my Starlink, and I haven't heard anyone say like you have DARPA Internet 2.0. Before anyone tosses tomatoes at me, oh look, Hervé is using DARPA Internet 2.0. You're using DARPA Internet 1.0. So shut up.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
it's like just
100%.
Shut. For any of
100%.
those haters, shut up. Seriously, like the people who comment on my Pentagon tube. The Pentagon tube. It's Pentagonpedia. It's Pentagon Pal. Right? Who are making these the armchair anons that I call them. I'm like, you're literally using DARPA Internet 1.0 on leaving a comment on Pentagon Tube to attack me. It's like, shut up. You're either living completely in the woods, Ted Kaczynski style, in which case you can then righteously criticize me. But if you're not living in the woods with in a cabin made without BlackRock Home Depot hammer, where you fashion the hammer yourself and you're living in the woods yourself, otherwise shut up. But I just wanted to add, because my internet was iffy, and the other day, one of my Mexican friends who lives on the outskirts of town, he's forced to use Starlink. There's no other option for his internet, and he downloaded a torrent, and Starlink sent him a message saying, if you do that again, we're gonna terminate your internet. He wasn't using a VPN. I told him you need to use VPN. And my other point on X, I've seen it degrade. I primarily use X to get the word out on geopolitics and empire, but also as a learning tool. I created my own algorithm to my feed for useful sources that I use for my weekly analysis, and it's completely degraded. It's, as you said, they put stuff out there to get you enraged, to waste time, and the quality of my news feed it's dead. So it should be the people that you follow, should be number one for my sources, which it was, and then they have the For You feed, and the weird thing has happened. The For You feed is their brainwashing feed, right? Well, what they want you to see. We've cultivated something we think you would like for you, right? And in that, there's going to be some good stuff, and there's going to be the stuff that they want you to program you with. And it's become inverted where my following feed has become absolute junk. Like I've scrolled through it, I can't find any good points for me to use. And the For You feed has become actually better. But then I know that the For You feed is stuffed with some of their mind control curation. So.
And distraction. So they want to distract you. They're going to try and tempt you algorithmically. They know exactly what you like. They've got a psychographic profile on every single person on this planet, and they're going to tempt you with what you already like, just to waste your time and try and get you focus on anything except for the fact that they're stealing 2 million. Now, I know we've been rolling for a while, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I could go through the rest of everybody. I'll just say, this is Quora. He's the ex-CTO of Facebook. This is the chief strategy officer at OpenAI. This is the co-founder and the president of OpenAI, ex-CTO of Stripe. This is another board member of Meta and the ex-strategy of Microsoft. And these are the people that are algorithmically censoring the internet, and they've been meeting in secret for 2 decades. And they're with the people that are being steered. So they're steering and they're pumping up, proven, the people that are meeting at Dialog. And so now I want to get to the last major bucket. Oh, by the way, so this is Aaron Berman. He's the person that runs misinformation policy at Meta. He is former CIA. So then all of these organizations that these people represent are chock full of spooks. And so the content moderation team at Facebook and Google are ex-CIA and ex-Unit 8200 out of Israel, which is their kind of version of the NSA. The content moderation team at Twitter was notoriously full of ex-FBI people. The content moderation team at TikTok is ex-State Department officials. And so all of these are, here's just an example from his own LinkedIn of, so he bailed out of the CIA into Meta, and now he, makes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, hiding information about who's picking your pocket, because these are all criminals. This is all a criminal organization. These people are criminals. They've been installed and they're meeting in secret. And the reason that they're meeting in secret is because they're stealing the money out of your pocket the same way as if they stuck their hand in your pocket and took it. They're just using a tricky system that most people don't understand. The school is not going to tell you about and the media is hiding from you. This is what I gave you the example. This is when Substack came in. This was our growth on Substack until the $100 million investment from Bond and from Andreessen Horowitz and the Chernin Group. And then they just turned us off. And it wasn't just off because they turned other people off as well. And so this is how the system works. This is how they're able to turn people off. Now, what is the final other big group? And there's a couple other ones. So I kind of ran out of time. I wanted to get the article out, and I have I could go on, and I do these deep dives into who these people are and everything. There's two more. One of them is the financial industry. So it's private equity. So the banks are creating money out of thin air, and so a lot of the dialogue participants are the people that are getting the money to buy up and monopolize the media, buy up and monopolize new media companies, buy up and monopolize, other companies into the cartel. They're operating as a banking cartel, and they're obscuring the ownership through, private equity managers and hedge funds and people like that. So that's it too. The other big bucket was intelligence people. So everyone from the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, to, House members on the Intelligence Committee, to, you name it. The other big bucket it's the intelligence agencies themselves, and it's the civilian oversight, the legislators that are sitting on the intelligence committees, and like people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is the DNI. But the really troubling one, is the final big bucket at Dialog are the people that are doing AI-driven autonomous weapon systems, drones, Terminator robots, and AI targeting. And this is going to be I'll do this and then we'll wrap it up. But so the people at Dialog that are in this, and so there's a couple different technologies here. One of which is AI targeting. Okay, and so AI targeting is when AI systems determine which individual people or vehicles or assets or something on a battlefield gets killed first. Okay. And so you can do everything from facial recognition to we're going to go after the officers to we're going to go after whatever in both autonomous weapons that are looking around, including doing facial recognition.
You just made something click for me for the first time. When you mentioned these AI targeting and systems, and now think about what they want from us desperately, our biometrics and face scans. Now think about for every nation globally. Now, if that makes us so they're going around marking us sort of as targets because they need our face for those AI systems, which it's a broad swath in terms of weaponry, which can include the debanking, geolocating us, and then ultimately, if they really want to physically take us out. And I just saw in the past week, you're showing this image of drones. I just saw real videos of real prototyping of a micro drone that killed a moth, like down to that minutia level. And then there was another drone. It was a small micro drone, but it spinned so fast that it was nearly invisible. So I was joking on my weekly update, you can be sitting on your porch and you won't even see it coming, So anyways, I just did that kind of click what you were saying. Yeah.
You got it. And so this is an Anduril Bolt M drone diving in for an attack. Okay. And so then it's essentially what it is. It's a drone that has a Claymore mine on the bottom of it. And a Claymore mine is, it's filled with ball bearings. And when it goes off, the ball bearings are hurtled, and just rip through you like giant buckshot. And so the drone piece is one technology. It's represented at Dialog by Palmer Luckey. Okay, this gentleman right here, that's his drone. Okay, but the targeting software is represented by Thiel himself, Alex Karp, John Lonsdale, and others. And so they make the software stack that tells the drone who to kill on the battlefield itself, okay? And whether to go after police cars or whether to go after your car using a flock, like we're going to go identify where your car is using flock, and we're going to send a drone, and we're going to make sure, and it's going to make sure that you're inside through facial recognition before it blows you up. This is the crew. So the Dialog Society represents the leading either CEOs, investors of companies that make the drone technology themselves, okay, or that are buying it. Dan Driscoll is the guy that's paying for the procurement, okay, and these are the companies that are at Dialog. Now, Elon Musk has these Optimus robots that are coming out that any time in the future can be reprogrammed by the same folks that sold you the COVID and bankrupted small businesses and forced injections into your family members. That's who's at the top of this thing. This is Alex Karp and Peter Thiel with members of the Israeli military that has been using this AI targeting with a system called Lavender and a system called Where's Daddy. In the case of Where's Daddy, they actually have a program called Where's Daddy that ascertains whether when a target is actually with their family. And then when the target's with the family, then they send either the autonomous system or the programmable system. Some systems, you don't even have to have it autonomous. It just needs to be programmable. And then it hits its target when they know that target is with its family. So they kill the whole family, not just the people. And these are the people that Thiel and Karp are hanging out with. Karp has publicly said that they lead all the targeting in Ukraine. And so we're waging a proxy war in Ukraine, and they're handling the targeting. Now, on the civilian side, I mentioned it, earlier, but Palantir has been ICE's data backbone since 2013. They built the investigative case management system, and in April 2025, ICE awarded them $30 million to build Immigration OS, folded into the existing deal, and its stated functions is prioritizing who gets removed first. They track self-deportations in near real time. They streamline the logistics. So if they wanted to go and scoop up a bunch of people in the United States, troublemakers that are blowing the whistle on their scheme, as an example, this is the software that would allow them to go and scoop up the liberty movement and the freedom movement and things like that with their, goon squads in real time. And so what is the danger for freedom? Well, guess what? They're ripping off the police and the military as well. And so, I'll end this with, Thiel had a really good quote on the Joe Rogan show where he said, the natural development of drone technology is you have to take the human out of the loop because the human can get jammed. And what does he mean by that? What he means is if they were really fighting for our freedom, this is what it would look like. And if the military and the police understood how that they were getting played, then all of a sudden they may not be working for the bankers anymore. They may be working for mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and their neighbors and their friends and their relatives. And we would go and we would arrest these people for all of the crimes and the fact they stole $2 million from each of us at a minimum. And so that's why they're working on drones, is they want to get the humans out of the loop by the time that the humans understand what's going on. And so we really are in a kind of race right now of, can we explain to humanity what's going on, or are they going to just be able to turn off and algorithmically censor, everything, going forward. And so that's what appears to be going on. These appear to be the people who are behind it. That connects the dots on the Dialog Society.
Dialog, and this is one of the first that I've seen in the alt media space, looks at the Bilderberg 2.0 dialogue, and then I'll just add this sort of addendum as well from Charles Hugh Smith, who's been a guest on the podcast, who does good work, and he just published yesterday, "Get the Flock Out of Here." And he talks about one of the core traits of a 1984 type totalitarian dystopia is 24/7 surveillance of every prisoner, citizen. And then he talks about how surveillance is no longer the unique purview of the central state. It's been fully privatized for profit by big tech and corporate America, just as you've sort of described privatized totalitarianism. It's a hybrid mix of public and private control structures, corporate commander Klaus Schwab's public-private partnerships, and we see it being applied in every country. I use my example here in Mexico. You've got the Mexican government, which is run by the globalists. I've mentioned recently, Scheinbaum is the floor manager. She's been visited by BlackRock Fink twice this year, Georgieva IMF. That's in your diagrams there. JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon, who was in CFR, I think, according to your list, and Borge Brand of WEF. So they're visiting Scheinbaum. She's implementing their policies in this public-private partnership. The phone registry here that they want to do is with, you take the Telcel private company and the Mexican government, and they're forcing Telcel to register us. And then once we're on that list, at any moment, that interfaces with the Mexican government from the private company. So anytime the Mexican government says, hey, give me Jorge's cell phone number, all of his metadata, phone call history, all of that, boom, they got me. They plug that into their Pegasus software or Titan software. They geolocate me in an instant. They can send 4 cops to kidnap me and kill me, like they just did in Guerrero, where 4 Mexican cops kidnapped and tortured and killed a activist. And in this article, Charles Hugh Smith, he continues saying, basically confirming everything you're saying, and then it's way beyond left versus right, socialist versus capitalist. He touches on controlled opposition here as well. He says they create this narrow band of you think of ultra processed food, ultra processed, carefully curated and controlled debate and dissent, which is the Sean Ryan, Tucker Carlson type of stuff. And he sort of concludes that one wonder, he confirms with what you're saying. One wonders if we have the collective will to say, get the flock out of here. Are we going to realize what's happening or not? And then he says, even living on a remote island isn't a solution, because this is going to come everywhere. So basically, either we're going to wake, and he paints this picture of what you discussed, where everything is completely surveilled. And if you attend a dissident meeting, the following day, your auto insurance is going to be canceled. The IRS will be notified, and you'll be audited for the first time in your life. The FBI will pay you a visit regarding sedition, so on and so forth. Neo-feudal autocracy. I kind of like that. So, yeah, we had our first crash course on Dialog. Any final thought for us, and then tell us about, I think, your new book and whatnot.
Yeah, well, just, the way out of it is what the Art of Liberty Foundation, calls the one-way revolution, which is the widespread societal understanding that government is illegitimate on its face. It is the scam. It has been, indoctrinated into the population, and it doesn't really have any legitimacy. You're not really bound by it. It was either the dumbest idea on the planet, giving, a ruling class a monopoly on violence and expecting that it could be disciplined by a piece of paper, or most likely what I think is it was actually, installed above us during the ratification by a group of conspirators. That's what the Anti-Federalists said. They said these are conspirators. These are bad men. They have bad intentions. It's a dumb idea. It's not going to work. The Anti-Federalists that were the real founding fathers, they were actually right. The Federalists were wrong. Everything the Anti-Federalists said would happen did. And so I think it was a brute force manufactured consensus of the bankers' newspapers at the time that stuck us in this easily rigged no-win game of elections. And the only way out of it is the widespread understanding, number one, that it's illegitimate, number two, that we don't really need government, that, the voluntarist idea, the voluntarist philosophy of the world is a self-organizing system that produces spontaneous order. The free market will provide every single thing you want the government to do, and it'll do it better, faster, and cheaper. And we'll all be dramatically wealthier because we won't have a crooked monetary system stealing the value out of our money. There won't be cartel companies that get funded with unlimited capital at the expense of mom and pops. There won't be chain restaurants everywhere. Like, we could go back and we could be you're not going to get rid of the chains, but you're not going to have the same unlimited capital provided to the chains as you do, right now. And so there is a way out, and that the only way out, if you war game it out, like, the only strategy is the Art of Liberty's widespread exposition, exposing the fact that the government itself is illegitimate. It's being run by these people at Dialog and the bankers, and they're stealing, and explaining to the people how they're being robbed. And then again, just abandoning government, and then that takes the power out of government. That's unstoppable. There's no, there's no way to you can stall it. But ultimately, I think society is going to come to that realization. Right now, we're fighting against this algorithmic censorship and promotion system. But ultimately, I'm an optimist. I think we win in the end. I think that, everybody knows government was a scam and is a scam, and that the government's not legitimate. And, everybody, I think you're going to get to that point in society, and that's where we really have to get. That's the way out.
Yeah, and I'll just add, from my biblical view, I always go back down to some of the core philosophies of give to Caesar what is Caesar's, said Jesus, and give to God what is God's. When they tried to trap him with do we pay taxes, right? And ultimately, we've gotten to a point where they're wanting us to give what is God's to Caesar, right? Yeah. My child's physical body with the injections and all those, that insanity, or us as adults, or our minds, right? This mind control, telling us what to think, and often what they want us to think is anti God, right? Or as you said, theft. Like, it's gotten to a point where what they want us to render to Caesar is no longer even Caesar's. Like what you mentioned about for the average middle class salary, whatever it was, 60,000 you outlined, like 1.4 million stolen. Like, it's gone beyond giving to Caesar what is Caesar's, and so just not complying, which again was the biblical worldview. It was like many of the apostles were like, "Look, bro, we're done here. We're not going to comply. Put us in jail, kill us. We don't care." And so, yeah, I think that's what we need to see going forward. Your links will be in the description to check out and follow the Art of Liberty website, the Substack. Check out the books. I've got the books, the USB, and so let's continue the dialogue. Pun intended. Thank you, sir.
It has been a pleasure. Talk soon.